Thanks very much for coming out this evening. Just a preliminaries, this is a Festival of Ideas event, as you might know. It's in partnership with St. George's. And in October, the Festival of Ideas is running its biannual Festival of the Future City. A wide range of films, talks, discussions. I think there are brochures on the seats. And also, there's a copy of the comic book, which is about the Home is for Heroes work, which we've been doing as well. We're here I'm Julian Bagini, and I'm here to have a conversation with Slavoj Žižek, who needs no introduction, so I won't really give him one, really. I mean, you've written, by this count, the latest book, Sex and the Failed Absolute, is certainly according to the Wikipedia bibliography, we don't always believe Wikipedia, his like 49th book to be published in English by his sole authorship. If you add up the books he's co-edited, co-authored, we're up to about 80 or so forth. And, you know, he has as an academic international peer-reviewed journal dedicated to his work. He has a lot of fans and enthusiasts, and also a lot of critics and detractors. I think he's saying that he's now said so many unpopular things that although he's been called things like, you know, the Elvis and rock star philosopher, that his audience...
And I even never liked Elvis Presley.
And he never even liked Elvis
This is what really
Presley.
annoys me. Can I tell some, you know what I'm now rediscovering? From my youth, some English bands rock. If you are old enough, do you remember a band, Family? Weaver's Answer, No Mules Fool, and so on. You are also too young, I think, for them. Okay, sorry for interrupting you.
It was just a story going. Anyway, so his latest book, Sex and the Failed Absolute, we'll talk a bit about that. There's a sentence in the book that struck me, which he says, the true enemy of the present book is the finest of non-thinking, an art which more and more pervades our public space. So hopefully this will be an evening of thinking rather than non-thinking. Now, I want to start off, I mean, if paradox is one of your favorite words, and one sort of paradox perhaps of your career is you have achieved this huge popularity, and yet your work's often actually, you know, it's heavy, serious, quite difficult. In this book, one of the key ideas at the beginning is an idea that you've come back to a lot in your work, which is this idea of the parallax. Are you able to explain that to us in words that we can understand?
No, first, I'm very grateful for this correct introduction, because almost often I am presented as, you know, cultural critic, paradox, postmodern, and so on. No, I already used in a self-presentation this metaphor. I want to share it with you. I love it. I hope you saw, everybody did, Hitchcock's Vertigo. You know that famous scene, and I was there in that Sequoia Park south of San Francisco. I saw it when Kim Novak Madeleine approaches it. You have some trees cut, and so you can see the years there from, I don't know, 1,000 years old tree, and she says, I was born here, I died there, no, as that Carlotta. And if somebody were to ask me, I would say if we were to get, like Madeleine, dressed in Vertigo, a muse of philosophy, she would have said, I was born here, 700, when was it? I don't know, 70, 71, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, and I died there, Hegel's death, 1831. My big obsession is that we haven't really left that period behind, that even the big struggle in philosophy of the last decades is still within this Kant-Hegelian, you may disagree, coordinates. On the one, I think what defines our predicament in the last decades, now we are maybe slowly moving beyond it, is this precisely, I didn't forget your question, parallax split. Parallax means you cannot bring, there is no pseudo-Hegelian dialectical synthesis. It's a radical incompatibility between, on the one hand, naive philosophical realism, we should simply describe the world it is, and so on, and on the other hand, what I very broadly call transcendental approach. Who are for me transcendental philosophers? I will try to be as clear as possible. The entire deconstructionism, or this so-called discourse analysis, and please interrupt me if I get lost or if you disagree. I mean, most of the people are idiots, but you are not among them.
thank you.
So please interrupt me.
I'll go home now. You can only go downhill.
Let's say if you were to ask somebody like Michel Foucault, a big discourse analyst, does a man have an immortal soul? His answer would have been, we can only talk about this within a certain episteme, within a certain discursive context, and all that thinking can do is to describe this episteme. By episteme, he means vaguely, I simplify, what phenomenologists would have called hermeneutic horizon and so on. In this transcendental tradition, to ask the direct ontological question, what is reality, is meaningless. All you can do is return the question, what do you mean by reality? In modernity, reality means a different thing than in medieval times. In medieval times, there was a meaning inscribed into reality, so we are hearing, I'm not so sure. With Descartes and so on, external reality becomes this gray, meaningless matter, and we only project. So you see my point. From philosophical thinking, this, I call it naively, the realist problem. Okay, then let's say you are Foucault. But if I ask you then, but F, 3 points off, tell me, so do I have a soul or not? He would not budge. He would say meaningless question, or like, and I think that, would you agree with this simple analysis that as a revenge then, these big metaphysical questions returned in natural sciences, like human freedom. Today you look into cognitive sciences to get an answer, or artificial intelligence, are we free or not? The origin of the universe, you look into quantum cosmology and so on. And I think, I wonder if you would agree, I mean, really, that maybe we should break out of this transcendental approach and dare to confront in some sense also, not in the old naive way, but nonetheless somehow the big ontological questions.
Well, it's nice for you to ask me, but I'm not sure. I mean, because from my point of view, I suppose, I read Kant and everything. Kant introduces this idea that the world in itself, the thing in itself, is simply unknowable. We're only in the phenomenal world, what you're calling this transcendental perspective.
Yeah.
Now, maybe in my overly relaxed way, I kind of think, okay, that's fine, I can see that. So why does this impulse persist that, we want to penetrate through this transcendental perspective, the purely the world of experience? We feel this yearning to kind of want to see reality in itself. Is it just a naive dream we should just give up?
Yeah, but nonetheless, the question persists. You will not squeeze out so simply. Are you a simple agnostic, ultimately, who claims there is some kind of reality, we just cannot ever reach it? Or, as a Hegelian, I would be tempted to say, what if there is nothing beyond? Not nothing in the sense that we are just dealing with illusory phenomena, but nothing in the sense that there is no big mystery behind. And that's I will try to give a very problematic example to provoke you, bringing us to sexuality, the title to explain it. What if I don't agree with this approach that we are just limited to contradictory antinomic phenomena, we cannot ever reach what a thing really is or reality beyond? What if, and this is for me, I know I proceed very fast here, I develop it more in detail in the book, the biggest lesson, that's why I think we haven't yet really apprehended what it means, of quantum physics, what really attracts me there is this idea that it's not just that our knowledge is imperfect, we cannot ever grasp the way reality is. What if reality in itself is somehow ontologically incompleted? If I may repeat an old story which I often use in my books, from some, maybe you know, it wasn't you, some very good introduction to philosophy, simple. The guy, I'm very sorry, I'm just old and senile, no aggressivity implied that I don't mention his name, I forgot it. He draws a parallel between video games and quantum physics and says, you know, in a video game, when you move in the virtual reality, they're immersed into a game, the reality there is not fully constituted. Like, for example, in the background you have a forest, but the creator of the game didn't program all the details of every tree because it's not part of the game for you to go there, you know. Or you have houses, if it's not part of the game that you enter the house, the inside of the house is not programmed. And the idea of this guy, I loved it, is that what if, it's very ironic reading, what if something similar happens in quantum physics? You know, this Heisenberg principle, we cannot measure of the same particle at the same time velocity and position. Now, there was an interesting polemic here between Heisenberg and Niels Bohr. And of course, I'm on the side of Niels Bohr. For Heisenberg, this was just our epistemological deficiency. We cannot measure it. Bohr claimed, no, it is in itself that the particle doesn't have both the position and that. So now, the ironic, and I love it, reading is this one. Imagine God as the programmer of our universe. And God simply thought, oh, you humans are too stupid. We will not be able to reach beyond atom. So why should I lose time planning, programming for you part? So if I may put it in this way, ironically, we, with quantum physics, how do you put it in English, caught God with his pants down, you know. We were a little bit too bright of him. Sorry, too intelligent, but I'm not a religious man, and the true problem for me is how to conceive this ontological openness, unfinished character of the universe without God. That reality in itself is not fully ontologically constituted, which is why a consequence. When you get to an antinomy, that's my Hegelianism, I will try to explain it as simple as possible. And I see, with full right, you are getting nervous, like, cut it short. As I made a joke to Julian before, referring to Goldfinger, you saw the movie. If he were to have in Goldfinger James Bond, he would have pressed the red button, you know, now to eject me. The antinomy, when we get caught in an antinomy, is for me not a sign of our limitation, but precisely the sign that we are approaching the thing itself. What if things in themselves are antinomic? To conclude and to offend you, some of you, although I'm deeply pro transgender LGBT, but you know what interests me so much in LGBT? The basic antinomy, which many LGBT theorists try to obfuscate. On the one hand, the predominant ideology of transgender, correct me if I'm wrong, people is, let's call it Judith Butlerism. It's this type of discursive historicism. There is no essential gender identity. Identities are constructed symbolically through contingent discursive games and so on and so on. Okay. But at the same time, did you notice how the language that transgender people speak when they want to change sex is an extremely essentialist language? Again and again, the media report how, for example, in my own country, Slovenia, we had many of them, but now a recent operation, a boy became a girl, and he gave a big interview, and she now, of course, said, finally, I exist in a body into which I should have been born. This is absolutely essentialist language. It is as if I have a fixed psychic identity, but there can be a mistake. My psyche gets embodied in the wrong gender identity. Now, for me, it's wrong to dwell into, okay, who is right? Historicist or this. I think there is a solution from my perspective here, more even Kantian, Schellingian one. Of course, I don't believe in pre-existence of the soul. Well, in eternity, I choose my sex, and then there can be a mistake or whatever. But isn't it, I like this notion developed by one of my favorite German idealists, Schelling, of this, he calls it eternal transcendental choice. He even calls it unconscious choice. Choice which you make, choosing your identity, but it's always a purely virtual presupposition. Never in reality do you make this choice. Now, to conclude, really, if you're stupid enough to believe me, you will say, but this is metaphysics. This is bullshit. No, I will remind you of, if you were ever passionately in love, of your most obvious self-experience. If there ever was a free act, it's the act of falling in love. If you never choose in the present to be vulgar in a male chauvinist way. Falling in love doesn't mean I look around, nice lady there, oh, she has nice eyes, she has nice legs, oh, let's make a list, this one has... Well, you never fall in love in present time. At a certain point, you discover that you already are in love. And I think that without involving any spiritual metaphysics, we should accept this as a basic fact of our identity. How contingent as our identities are, and so on, I believe in fate, but not in eternal fate. I believe in predestination, but it's a retroactive predestination. We create it And the last one, then, please, allow me. Sorry. And this brings us to the problem of subjectivity. You know what, for me, that's why I sincerely, no arrogant irony here. I love LGBT theorists, intelligent, many of them are, who use this term LGBT whatever plus. It always bothered me, what is this plus? The usual explanation is simple British empiricist openness. There shouldn't be just binary identity, male, female. There are many identities, trigender, asexual, whatever. But we cannot ever be sure that we covered them all. So let's leave it open. Maybe we will discover another identity. Nobody should be excluded. No, I claim, this would be my Hegelian twist, that you can be directly a plus as such. Your identity can be precisely the excess over every identity, and my claim would have been, I cannot develop it now, read the book if you want to learn more, that hysterical subject, feminine hysterical subject, and from my psychoanalytic perspective, subjectivity is feminine. For me, hysteria is not depreciation. The bad guys are perverts for me. Perverts are... Every totalitarian power needs a pervert. This is the basic hysterical identity, and to give you a ridiculous example, that's why I love it. When you say to a woman, I love you, you get this eternal question. Tell me why you love me. You cannot answer. Because the woman provokes you, that's the hysterical provocation of a master. Tell me what's my identity. And of course, you never can get an answer to this one. You know, sorry for this confused introduction.
I hope you're all keeping up. All right.
No, I stopped. Surprisingly, I stopped now.
Well, I do want to rewind a bit, because what was interesting in what you said was we were starting and we were talking about what seemed to be abstract metaphysics, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about, how there's a difference, a view in which there's an ultimate reality, or whether we're just stuck within whatever framework we have. And then we went, and you started talking about transgender and the different sort of the identities there. and how there's this sort of contradiction between, or maybe a tension between a view where everything is very fluid and nothing is determinate.
I agree totally
and the
with
way
you
in which
here.
we do
It's a
that.
very good point that the term contradiction should be used very carefully.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
Very good. So the point is, but I just want to sort of like tease out the link there. What's the connection between these sort of what seem like abstract and metaphysical theories, which you said at one point, this is not just metaphysics, this is not just bullshit. What's the connection between that metaphysical problem and a practical, political problem like this issues of transgender identity?
I will give you a very maybe naive answer. I think that what is happening today, although many people dismiss me as misogynistic, no, I think that what is happening today with transgenderism and so on, even Me Too, is that for thousands of years, even before class society, there was a certain fixation of gender roles, and that is breaking down today. That we are at a point of incredible opening. Basic rules of gender identity and so on will have to be rewritten. That's the great thing that is happening. And second thing, I claim that, but I cannot, of course, develop it fully now. I claim that this sexualized opposition, the traditional notion of masculine, feminine, always also secretly at least influenced our ontology, even the most abstract philosophy. For example, that's why I prefer Plato to Aristotle. Aristotle's ontology is hyle, morphe, is masculine versus feminine, and so on. Aristotle openly says it, and so on and so on. So these are, for me, as a Hegelian, the most fascinating moments when, and that's why we live in a great era, I think, even if we will all die because of ecology or what, that even stuff of our daily experience, what to do with transgender people and so on, and what should they do with themselves, of course, it's not just one particular struggle. Very basic things are at stake there. Even this is what, again, always fascinates me. When we are apparently dealing with a minor problem of sexual politics, but it has radical, even philosophical, very fundamental philosophical implications.
And also psychoanalytic ones, because one of your other great influences is Lacan, right? So you bring this psychoanalytic view, and like you said, you think that these categories of masculine, feminine affect our thinking. I mean, are you also saying that actually, essentially, unconscious, often sexual desires as well have to be brought to the table if we're going to understand the way we think even about politics and social issues, ethics?
Although I'm here, first I must say that one has to be very precise here with what one means by the unconscious. I don't believe in some substantial unconscious which then allows you to get rid of your responsibility for it, so that you can say, okay, I did that, but sorry guys, it's not me, it's my unconscious which determined me. First, in a very idealist way, I believe in total self-responsibility. Freud already said this when he said, psychoanalysis is much more severe than Christian church. In Christian church, you are responsible for your acts, for what you know. In psychoanalysis, you are even responsible for what you don't know. That you are. So I am not in this sense referring to the unconscious. For me, unconscious is something much more subtle. Let me give you, I have it in the book. Sorry, I will make a joke at my expense. In our still male chauvinist universe, the idea is this one. Only we men can think in abstract terms, concepts. Women, stupid, they have to go from particular to particular. Okay, then I'm a woman, sorry. I always jump from particular. So I will give you a wonderful example for what I mean, an indication as the unconscious. It's not a substantial reality, the real me. is something very fragile, virtual. Let me retell you a story, maybe some of you know it, that I use probably in 2 or 3 of my books. Did you see the movie Billy Bathgate? It's not a good movie. Nicole Kidman and I don't know who. Okay, it's based on a novel by Doktorov. A movie, it's a bad movie, but somehow you discern in it the echoes of how you feel that the novel should have been much better, how it failed to capture a great novel. Now comes the beautiful paradox, for me beautiful. Then I said, okay, let's read the novel. It's even worse. So you know what happened? Bad novel, bad movie, but through this repetition, a third virtual entity emerges, and that would have been purely virtual, the unconscious. Or to give you another, my favorite musical example, I love classical music. Schumann Humoresque. Piano piece, you have 2 lines of notes for right hand, for left hand. And then Schumann puts a 3rd line, notes which are not supposed to be played. But the point is to play the written notes so that somehow they echo the 3rd line. And now things get really mysterious where you have a series of notes, melody, with this 3rd line. Then you get the same series of notes without the 3rd line. To give you my last example, along the same lines, my favorite joke, I repeated it, I think, in the last years, 5, 6 times in my books. My favorite joke, very Hegelian, from Ernst Lubitsch's classical comedy, Ninotchka. You know, everybody knows this joke. A guy goes to a cafeteria and says, coffee without cream, please. And the waiter says, sorry, sir, we don't have cream, so I cannot give you coffee without cream. We only have milk, so I can give you coffee without milk. That's what Hegel meant with bestimmte Negation, determinate negation. Of course, we have 3 entities here. Materially, they are the same. Plain coffee, coffee without milk, coffee without cream. But in their symbolic identity, they are not the same. And this would have been something like unconscious. This purely virtual without, but which as without is still there. So that would be my point, to totally desubstantialize, how should I put it, the unconscious. Forget about those metaphors, this iceberg, you see just 1/10, and the deep majority, largest part of the ice beneath water. It's not this substantial identity. It's something purely virtual, very fragile. And to give you the last teasing moment, that's what worries me now. I follow, this will be my next book. I also with Bloomsbury, I'm not betraying them. I'm now deeply into the problem of, are you dealing with it? Did you write something about the so-called wired brain, Neuralink, whatever? No. Yeah, first, I also thought that's bullshit. They are dreaming. But quite many things, they already can do it. And what interests me immensely is, if, even in a modest way, something like wired brain, the idea is if a machine can somehow decrypt your line of thoughts, then maybe this can be connected with another brain, and we will not even need words, we'll be able directly to share our experiences. Here I'm asking quite naive questions, like, sorry, again, my old guys dream about sex, vulgarities like me. Can you imagine how this will affect our process of seduction? It's none of this charm, we flirt, I indicate something ambiguous. If I'm with somebody and we flirt, and if our minds are in direct contact, it's just, I want to F you, yes, okay, let's do it. You know, all this. What will remain? I claim that all our human creativity is based on radical limitations. What happens if this limitation will be abolished?
Well, we're halfway there with a lot of apps anyway, because a lot of people get that out of the way.
Sorry,
we're halfway there with hookup apps anyway, I think, to taking out the seduction part of it.
Yeah,
but listen,
I know.
But let's just take one thing which perhaps is the most surprising, one might sound even ludicrous sounding claim in the book.
I know, there are many of them.
okay.
I'm the first one to admit, yes.
So this idea of, you mentioned it earlier, that this idea that you say is suggested by quantum theory, that imperfection is a part of reality itself. Our connection with ultimate reality is, in a sense, the incompleteness and imperfection of ultimate reality. And so your second theorem, you divide the book into clear sections.
It's
The
a little bit pretentious and bombastic, I agree, yeah?
The second theorem is that sex is our brush with the absolute. So if I can just read the theorem, it says the only way for us, humans caught in the parallax gap, to break out of it is through the experience of sexuality, which in its very failure to achieve its goal enables us to touch the dimension of the absolute. That sounds to me like perhaps a very intellectual chat-up line, but...
Yeah, but I agree, and I expected this reaction, of course. But I must say that first, what I mean by this, it's obviously not this, for me, really ludicrous line, oh my God, when you are F-ing somebody intensely, that's it, you feel the absolute. Quite on the contrary, for me, human sexuality is always about failure, postponement, repetition, and so on. Let me give you again, I will do what you already noticed, a jump from high speculation to everyday experience. Let's say you are a woman, although I don't know why I say this, whoever. Let's say we shake hands. We just shake hands. Yeah. It's okay. But let's say that after we shake hands, I would not drop your hand, but I will just repeat the same gesture. Automatically, your impression would have been something dirty is on his mind. Why is he going on? And I think human sexuality always has this link with failure and then how to turn. This is what differentiates human sexuality from animal mating. I used, in that unfortunate debate with Jordan Peterson, my favorite example of French cuisine. A French friend of mine explained to me that all the miracles of French cuisine can be explained as turning a failure into a success. Like, you are doing normal Swiss cheese, you were lazy, the cheese got rotten, haha, we invented camembert or whatever, you know. Or you are doing wine, something goes wrong with fermentation, wait a minute, we got champagne or whatever, you know. And I think that human sexuality is never simply we just want and mate or whatever, we do it. It's always through this detours, seduction and so on, which is why, and here Freud, I think, is still actual. You know, Freud's theory is much more radical. It's not already dated, as many people claim. Freud's claim is a very strange one. His point about children's sexuality is that you have this first form of sexual awakening, 5, 6 years or whatever, where you have many fantasies and so on. You don't know what it is about. But then Freud says something much more radical. It's not that once you are adult, it's over, you know. No, all the time you need some fantasy. I'm never alone with my partner or partners or whatever. You always need a fantasy. You always need a fantasy support. So back to your question, I think that, and in the first chapter, I approached this problem quite naively. I asked in a very naive way the question of, and I like this to return to traditional philosophy, what are our possible contacts with the absolute? The first version is traditional metaphysical, mystical experience. There are moments of metaphysical trance, whatever, we are there. Then the second version will be the negative, destructive one, Marquis de Sade and so on. Our only contact, since all reality is transient, disappearing, everything that arises will be destroyed, the only way to touch the absolute is the in acts of absolute destruction. Then we get what I call the transcendental position, which for me is what is at work in so-called Western Marxism. For them, social practice is the ultimate transcendental horizon, which means George Lukács, the great founder of Western Marxism, said that even nature is always a historical category. This doesn't mean there is no nature, but the way we understand nature is always socially overdetermined. So even if you talk about, I don't know, primordial void, Big Bang, and so on, it's always mediated in its horizon of meaning by our social practice. We have all, and I try to offer another solution, which is a deeply Freudian one, I claim, that it's very naive what I will say, the properly metaphysical dimension. By metaphysical, I don't mean another realm. I mean you live your ordinary life, and something happens which interrupts the flow. You get fixated that originally this is eroticism. And even, let me give you again another everyday experience. Did you ever fall really passionately in love? And I'm not talking about some spiritual love, but this really, I want to F you like crazy and so on. Admit it, it's a catastrophe, it's not happiness. I cannot imagine anything more happy than not being passionately in love. You meet friends, you drink beer, one night stand here and there, life goes on. Then you fall in love, it's a catastrophe. Your life is ruined, you have to worry all the time and so on and so on. This is for me, and I think the Freudian hypothesis is that this is the original, if we mean by metaphysics. Again, not any transcendent dimension, but something that interrupts the flow of ordinary life. That it's eroticism, this erotic fixation. And now, I don't have time to go more into Hegelian waters, where my idea would have been that, of course, religious people would have said, maybe, but this is only the lower form of, like, you begin maybe with erotic transcendence, but then you have to have pure ideas, God. I'm saying, no, that's the original experience of transcendence. And then that all so-called higher spiritual experiences are based on this. And I'm here talking not only about some spiritual love, but even about sexual experience at its most concrete. It's an interruption, something that breaks the flow, and so on and so on. And then I do something even more crazy, I admit it. I link this sexual experience to, I know this is the craziest hypothesis for some people, but I think my reading is justified to, I don't know, I don't want to bore you too much with Kant. Kant isolates two types of antinomies of pure reason, mathematical and dynamic antinomies. And I think there is sexual difference inscribed there. In other words, for me, sexual difference is not a difference between two types of gender identities. It's just two types of the same deadlock. Again, what fascinates me here, and I think this is human eroticism, is how, what you already mentioned also, how the very limitation comes first. Limitation opens up the space for transcendence. That's the paradox, that if you take the limitation away, you don't get the higher thing itself. You lose everything. My favorite example, it's a little bit male chauvinist. I use it in my books, I'm sorry. I was years ago in some country, I don't want to embarrass anyone, I will not mention, just flirting with an elder lady. And to probably seduce me, she told me when her last lover saw her naked that he told her, except for 1 or 2 pounds too much, you have a perfect body. You can imagine what my reaction to the lady was. Just don't lose that. Don't try to lose 1 or 2 pounds. Because the perfection was a mirage created by that surplus. If you take away 1 or 2 pounds, you don't get a perfect body. You get a bland, ordinary body. You see, this is what fascinates me at all levels. Let me give you another example. It's erotic, and then I will stop.
Yeah.
Did you see that movie? I consider it disgusting otherwise, but it's a kitschy scene. Did you see 4 Weddings and the Funeral? Hugh Grant's love declaration to Andy McDowell. How he gets involved in all this, faked, of course, stuttering, confusion, repeats himself. But the idea, of course, is obvious of the scene, that precisely in this way, through the failure to say clearly what he wants, he gets the message through. If it would have been a perfect, regular statement, declaration of love, it wouldn't have worked. This is what fascinates me at all levels. This idea of how we get obstacles to some authentic transcendence, but the very obstacle creates, as it echo the dimension of transcendence. If your idea is, let's get rid of the obstacle, let's get directly at the thing itself, you lose the thing.
Okay, probably one more question before I open up to the audience, because I want to get the audience in.
We are like leaders of the working class. Screw them. Why don't we talk? Now I will talk like a Stalinist. We know better than the people what is really good for the people.
Okay, there you go.
Sorry, but this joke was very serious. That's my problem with populism. We intellectuals may be even more stupid than ordinary people, but unfortunately, I don't have this Maoist trust. Learn from the ordinary people. There is no wisdom in them.
Okay. Well, but these are not ordinary people. These are anyway. But listen, there were a lot. We mentioned earlier how you've managed to sort of offend so many people now that
more or less everybody.
More or less everyone.
Everyone,
now, I mean, there are lots of. We've talked about specific things that you said. You said, for example, although you're horrified by Trump, you would have voted him for various reasons. You got sort of.
I'm afraid, sorry to interrupt you. Wouldn't you agree? My point, and I made it very clear. Without Trump, there wouldn't have been Bernie Sanders and democratic socialism. My calculation was a very brutal Leninist one. Trump is a great risk. Although, if you ask me, I have friends who know people who know people. It may surprise you. I'm a weird guy who have connection in State Department and even a Pentagon. And they told me, in all probability, Hillary Clinton would already have attacked Iran or North Korea. So, but what I'm But what I'm saying is this. Are we aware what great thing is happening? For the first time in half a century, socialism is taken seriously. There is a serious alternative. That's what I predicted, and it happened.
Yeah. Okay, so what I want to ask is, rather than going to a specific issue, you're obviously very critical of what you might call sort of left liberals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So can we get to what's the nub of your problem with them?
What's
that's the heart of it? What's the essence, as it were, to use the word horrible essence, of your disagreement with the liberal left position? What's the core of the problem with their worldview?
The core of the problem is, again, in psychoanalytic terms, you could put it that it's the problem of fetishist denial of, I don't know, like this old word of class struggle, let's say social tension or whatever. I think, this very naive, we can debate about it, psychoanalytic notion of fetish. Fetish is very naive Freudian theory. The last thing you see before you notice that, it's very naive, I'm not advocating it, before you see that woman has no penis. So that's why it's fur, like pubic hair, and so on. But this idea is important, that you are confronting a social antagonism, and fetish is the element which somehow stands in for that antagonism, but at the same time obfuscates it. That's why, for example, in in fascist anti-Semitism, Jew is a fetish. Jew is a stand-in for social antagonism. That's why if you analyze anti-Semitic figure of the Jew, it combines upper and lower class features. Jews are too intellectual, money laundering, and dirty, promiscuous, and so on. So my suspicion is that this is why left liberals hate Trump so much. I mean, I hate him. He's disgusting. He's crazy. He married a Slovene girl. How can I? Serious guy. But what I'm saying is that it's as if Trump is the last thing they see before they see class struggle, social antagonism. And that's why Trump won. Because left liberals like to displace social antagonism with, they love fight against racism, feminist struggle, and so on, just not to control social antagonisms. I am all for anti-racism, feminism, and so on, but connect it with social struggles and so on. And that's what, for example, bothers me with Me Too. My hero, do I quote her here or somewhere else? I don't know. It's a lady called, I think I didn't confuse the name, Tarana Burke, an old American dignified black lady who even invented the term years ago of Me Too. And it's horrified at what happened now with this. Basically the medium for failed movie stars and so on. You know who is even my hero here? The actress, political hero, Kirsten Stewart. He made recently a wonderful interview for, I don't know, Vanity Fair or Vogue, where she also attacks this official line of Me Too, and she says, why focus on failed stars? She says, make just one step back. Go to any studio, all the makeup girls, all the secretaries, that they're regularly sexually harassed, nobody even mentions that, and so on and so on. I mean, and this Tarana Burke says the same. They said originally Me Too was meant, and in some countries work like this. I like South Korea, where it's a mass movement of women, tens of thousands demonstrating and so on. And the way it was twisted here, that's my bad feeling with left liberals. It's the same with refugees. This got me into a lot of trouble. No, as if I'm brutal, let the refugees starve. No, I'm saying let's not turn the problem of refugees into a humanitarian problem. Let's make a step back. Let's try to change the situation which creates refugees. Why did United States attack Iraq? What goes on in Syria? Go to Libya, go to Congo. Nightmare. No, you change it into a humanitarian problem. People are arriving there, starving. We will do something. More has to be done. I more and more think that this liberal obsession with refugees, open our gates today, it's a very disgusting manipulation with ordinary people. The upper classes, they live in their enclosed areas. They never get into a contact with refugees. And it's ideal so that you cook up a conflict between two groups of underprivileged people. Ordinary people and refugees, and you are above with your moral wisdom. In Slovenia, my country, when there were 2-3 years ago, a big wave of refugees, I was for them, but I understand ordinary people. On the border with Croatia, there were farmers close to the border. One day, one morning, in front of your house, there is a column of 10,000 refugees. And of course, they are humans like us. There are criminals among them and so on. All the big city, Ljubljana, capital of Slovenia, elite were shocked. Racism, primitive, ordinary people. No, this is what I hate. This fake upper middle class liberal approach, which then, which basically again is here to obfuscate through social antagonisms.
Yeah. So, short little follow up on that, because I mean, you still use the term communist to describe yourself, and partly I think
to provoke again.
But
it's nice term.
No,
Everybody
But-
can be socialist.
Yeah,
Bill
yeah,
Gates
yeah.
is a socialist. Communism, it's...
But you know, partly. But you know, because partly, as you say, that all these other things are distracting from the fundamental struggles. So for that reason, in America, Trump or Hillary, you vote Trump. Short question.
But
in
not
the UK,
because of Trump himself,
No.
but because
Yeah.
Trump, precisely because
Yeah.
the horror he is,
Yeah.
gave a push to the left. Yeah.
So in the UK today, Corbyn,
No,
Corbyn or Johnson?
No. It's not that I'm Boris Johnson or that I am in France Marine Le Pen. I made a judgment. This was not a principled
No, I
decision.
understand.
I
So,
will
but
give you a
in the
very
UK.
precise answer. I think, and it's an empirical judgment, maybe I was wrong, but I think the United States are such a diverse country with so many different structures of power that Trump in power in the United States, it's different than Boris Johnson here, or even more than Alternative for Germany in Germany, or especially Marine Le Pen in France. I think that Trump is worth, maybe I was wrong, it was not a transcendental decision for Trump is maybe worth the risk. Boris Johnson is not, Marine Le Pen is definitely not, and so on.
Great.
But what worries me, aren't you worried? Like the total disorientation, how successfully Labour Party is screwing things up and ruining itself. Are they all working for Boris Johnson or what? And this is the question I ask myself. I would still vote for them. But all in United States, my God, what the Democratic Party is doing now, trying to sabotage Bernie Sanders, all the dirty games, they're really doing everything possible to make Trump re-elected. If I were to be a Stalinist, I would have said Democratic Party is the main agent of Trump.
Okay, now is the chance to have your say. So we're going to raise the lights. We've got some microphones. We're going to take. Could we ask for your questions, if at all possible, to be questions rather than speeches with the words "Do you agree?" at the end, and also to be as brief as possible because
I am not brief as
he's
possible.
not as brief as possible. Okay, let me see here. We do have. I think I'll just go the microphone there at the side there.
But sorry, at the end, can I get a question from you? Because I appreciate you, I know your work, I take it very seriously. And can you scrap this politeness and ask me a really brutal question? Okay. I'm not bluffing now. Like, here I don't agree with you.
Oh, I'll ask you a brutal. I think what the brutal question is, as we're taking questions. So,
Okay.
So we have the first one here.
Please.
Hello. Is
I
that
hope
working?
it will work,
Yeah?
that we will hear it. Yes.
Hello. So I'll just preface this by saying I'm a huge fan of your work. I've read a huge bunch of your books. My
But
question is, though...
I already hear you sharpening your knife behind your back. Yeah. Please, sorry.
It's fine. My question really is, like, why have you chosen to write this book about this topic now? It just seems like there are maybe kind of bigger issues at the moment, like, for instance, climate change and ecological crisis. And this idea of like repetition through history, and that's fine if you've got like enough time for that. So Marxism had time, hundreds of years. Lenin, Marx, Mao, blah blah blah. But what if we don't have time because of climate change and ecological collapse? What if the next time the absolute fails is the final time and we don't get another chance to repeat it? Like, I mean,
Okay.
You say we sit through 8 years of Trump to get Sanders, but what if 8 years of Trump is all we have?
Okay, so I think
Okay.
we've got just the question. Yeah.
Very briefly, it's even worse than you imply. People who follow vaguely my work notice that somewhere from less than nothing, I'm basically rewriting again and again the same book. Even the structure is similar. Transcendental antagonism, parallax, then how to move beyond it, and so on and so on. Why? Because first, I still, no matter how urgent the situation is, I believe in big thinking. My favorite quote from Marx passage is, 1870, it looked for a brief moment, it was an illusion, but French-Prussian War, that there will be a revolution. And Marx wrote at that point a letter to Engels, where he says, my God, already a revolution, but I haven't yet finished Capital. Let them wait. I deeply sympathize with this idea that let's have trust in theory. We need it more than ever today, pure theory, because today we really, like our situation with wired brain, ecology, and so on, these are all very concrete, pressing problems. Just think about wired brain and digital control. What an incredible threat to our freedoms this is, because till now, the threat to our freedom was more or less visible, the Soviet Union threat. You turn around, oh my God, there is a guy following me. Today, our very freedom, what we experience as our freedom, is just the form of our unfreedom. What can be more free than freely surfing on the net and so on, buying things, but everything is registered? So I claim that that's maybe what is so exciting, but also in a desperate sense today. We are obviously in an era where we have to really think we need new forms of thinking, the ethical dilemmas we are confronting today with mind control, with ecology, and so on and so on. Our entire ethics is changing. Here we have to move beyond Hegel, because Hegel was not an optimist. Never forget, in his philosophy of right, Hegel's final word is not this new corporate, almost fascist state that he described. It's war, the necessity of war. And Hegel is there saying something with which we shouldn't agree, but it's in some historical sense true. Our notion of duty, of ethics, is all grounded on war. The idea is in everyday life, you work for your profit, blah, blah, but the moment of ethical truth is when your country is in danger. Are you ready to sacrifice your life, and so on and so on? It's obvious that we have to move beyond this. That's why I advocate, with all the mistakes he made, people like Julian Assange or Snowden and so on. It's a wonderful new notion that maybe today the highest ethical act is treason, but the right kind of treason. So, sorry, so what I'm saying is that I precisely don't want to renounce the big metaphysical question, because as I already answered you, I think that that this is what basically is at stake today. Look at ecology. There is maybe not a field today which would have been more penetrated by ideology than ecology. All possible forms of, ideology. All possible forms of ideology are there. There is denial. Donald Trump. It's a pseudo problem. There is the capitalist solution. We will tax more within the market and so on. The worst version, then there is the conservative solution. Mother Nature, we should become more modest and so on. Then there is the worst one, form of ideology in ecology, this personal responsibility turn. You criticize big company, what is society telling you? Who are you to criticize? Did you recycle all Coca-Cola cans? Did you put all the paper aside? And this is a wonderful ideological trick. It makes you responsible, like, do your job here, don't criticize, but at the same time, it offers you an easy way out. You know, I recycle, blah, blah, so I can go on and so on and so on. So, but even, like, for me, the greatest temptation of ecology is the idea of good, big Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a bitch, dirty bitch. Imagine we live of fossils, oil, and so on. Can we even imagine catastrophes which must have happened before humanity on our Earth? So, and that's for me the true problem with ecology. It's not that we, humanity, are a hubris and we just have to return to nature. No, nature is already crazy. There is no easy way back. So, I'm not avoiding your question. What I would always insist is what I already told you, that for me, the unique feature of our era is how to confront this very pressing problems, refugees, ecology, digital control, we have to raise fundamental, I would even say, metaphysical questions.
Thank you very much. Now, that hand there has been there from the beginning, so could we pass the
But I
microphone
noticed
there?
that you are
Is
a
pretty-
right-winger. What about left?
Yeah. No. I was
You
just looking
have
at the
to
hands up.
notice the hands there.
Yeah, I am trying to notice hands everywhere, but this one's been waiting first. We're going to take this one, and then we're going to
I'm
go
sorry,
to...
bad
yeah,
taste,
maybe.
yeah,
Go on,
human.
go on. I need to look up here too. Anyone up here? Yeah, no, you ask your question. I'm going to look for hands up here.
Hi there. I was wondering what your essential message would be to nihilistic youths that can't even assert any kind of fundamental value to their lives to begin asking and discussing these kind of questions.
That's an interesting question, but you know what would have been my answer here? I was recently, it's not really, you know, I'm a legend for this, and I don't deserve to be a legend that I never answer questions, you know. I only, as Marxist said, sorry to go to a brief detour, I remember it would be a wonderful essay to write about the different predominant titles of the books in different epochs. Half a century ago, more, it was simple, direct title, aesthetic theory. Then, after 68, people began to doubt it. And all of a sudden, titles changed. If you are a Marxist, not Marxist aesthetics, but elements for a future Marxist aesthetic. You were afraid to be there. Yeah. Then came the abominable 80s, 90s, postmodernism. Did you notice it? There was a formula, which was a poetic title, explanatory subtitle, like, sorry for tasteless example, beat me more violently, darling, masochism in English feminine poetry in the 19th century. Now, I think I am still regressive in the second stage. I give elements for an answer. So what was the question?
I can't remember the question either.
I wanted, but I had a point. The question was, I'm very sorry. I will be brief, I promise.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah.
Nihilistic
I
youth.
would say that the problem is not, how do you say it correct English? Nihilism.
No, people say it both ways.
Both ways. Okay. I think that the way, you know, people say, I recently read that Walter Benjamin text on capitalism as religion. If you look closely at capitalism, it's a very religious, metaphysical phenomenon. A true capitalist, it's not an egotist. He's ready to work day and night to ruin his life just for the reproduction of the capital. So we don't need these ethical calls, you know. Don't be egotist and so on. Maybe we need more rational egotism even. The problem with capitalism is not that it's nihilistic. It's that in some sense it's in its practice too metaphysical. If by metaphysics we mean our material reality is not all, there is another dimension for which we are ready to ruin everything. That's capitalism. We all know our earth is falling apart, but we play our metaphysical game with circulation of capital and so on and so on. So I would say I don't think the problem today is simply nihilism. It's nihilism as form appearance of a false transcendence or a false metaphysics.
Now, do we have the microphone on the balcony? And if so, can it go there? Yes, we do. We do. At the front, down here. It's coming. She's standing, so we're
That was
getting there.
efficient. I was afraid
We
that
have
we
a
would
little
lose
bit-
5 minutes. But
No.
it worked, yes.
We've lost 20 seconds. Good.
So you're a socialist.
No, I'm a communist.
Okay.
No, sorry, I'm not kidding. Everybody is
Even-
socialist
even
today,
worse.
almost.
How many times do we have to try? We failed miserably so many times.
Who?
It's,
Socialism.
yes, and communism. It's like making a souffle again and again and again, and it's failing. How many times and why?
Okay, a good, honest question. I totally agree with it. Although, and this is for me a very sad thing. I don't celebrate it, what I will say now. But you know, when people told me communists, when they get into power, always screw it up. Now, again, I repeat it, don't misunderstand me. This is a very sad thing for me, but do you know of any greater economic miracle, maybe in the entire history of humanity, than what China achieved in the last half a century? Communists in power did this. And how they did it, it's horrible. The Western left in the West really hated two things in the 20th century: wild, unbridled capitalism and authoritarian state. And the Chinese communists combined precisely these two. Where I disagree with liberals is when they say, oh, if after Tiananmen they would have allowed more also political freedom. No, it would have been chaos, I think. It wouldn't have worked. And this makes me extremely sad. Your question, I totally agree. That's why most of the leftists proclaim me now already a neo-fascist or whatever. 20th century, the fate of communism. With socialism, it's more complex. I mean, what social democrats did in some countries, it was a nice thing, whatever you say about it. No, I will say now something which is horrible for a leftist, but take this left-leaning, center-left Western Europe till recently. Now I will ask you a very naive question. Was there ever in the history of humanity a period where so many people lived relatively free welfare lives than in Europe from 1950 to 2000? Let me tell you something like that. One has to be honest here. Why am I still a communist? I totally agree with you. It was in spite of its partial successes, but they were terrifying successes, like China, Maoism, and so on. It was a catastrophe. I agree. The problem I see is simply the following one. We are confronting serious problems today. Let's name them, basically, the way I see. Digitalization, new forms of control, ecology, and maybe population mix, new forms of power, and so on, and so on, and so on. And the only serious question for me is the following one. Are we Fukuyamaists or not? By this I mean, and almost all the leftists that are no, even Bernie Sanders and so on, are Fukuyamaists. By this I mean they accept liberal democratic capitalism as a form and just want to make it a little bit more human rights, more social solidarities, blah, blah. Is this enough? So I am, to provoke people, I declare myself a communist because I think that if we go systematically through these problems, neither the state regulation in the old communist way, nor the market, or even not some, that's why I'm against populism, kind of a popular initiative can really confront these problems like ecology, which is the problem of the commons. You cannot leave it to the market, ecology. Threats are too great. Imagine Fukushima or Chernobyl or whatever. Imagine probably it will happen even stronger. We need to invent, I don't know how, new forms of larger than state coordination. It's clear that ecology cannot be dealt with at the level of, and one doesn't have, I agree with you here, if this will be your point. I'm the first one against this easy eschatology. Even many ecologists are prone to it. It's so easy to succumb to this temptation. I remember some 40 years ago, 30, in Germany, there was this, and then in all of Europe, there was the obsession with what they called Waldsterben. The forests are dying. And they make charts, our era around, I remember. 2010, 2020, there will be no forests in Europe. Statistics tell you that today, there are in Europe more forests than ever in the last 100 years. So it's not so simple, but I nonetheless claim this problem is a serious one. Take the problem of new forms of digital control. I'm just asking you, how would you confront these problems? We are really, and Chinese are already doing it. We are also doing it. We are just doing it a little bit more discreetly than Chinese. New form of social manipulation control, and I think that Again, neither the state nor the capital can confront this problem. Something will have to be done. Will it be done? I'm even a pessimist. You know what's more and more my old man's resigned vision? That we need, hopefully, controllable, moderate catastrophes to awaken us.
Okay.
I'm a pessimist. I'm not this optimist communist. You know maybe you know my standard joke, communists or leftists like to say there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know what's my answer? Yes, it's another train coming tomorrow.
Listen, if you want me to ask my rude, direct question, you'll have to answer this last question.
Okay.
Which
Finally,
briefly,
to the
briefly.
left. I already had a room in Gulag reserved for you. Now you are redeemed.
I don't know if you...
Please, a little bit.
Yeah. No, just hold it to your
Hello?
mouth.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've addressed this issue directly, but I wanted to know your thoughts about the phenomena that has become Greta Thunberg, as we all probably know. Why has this happened now?
Which
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Is she the collective wake-up call that we all need? Or, I mean, especially because the things she's saying now is something that indigenous leaders in, for example, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia have been saying all along. Why do you think this is without undermining her?
Okay, thanks.
I wrote some comments on her, and it's not sure, will he succumb to be in a more refined way manipulated by the media and so on. But where I praised her, basically I'm still for her, is what is apparently a private feature of her. I think she is usually decried as autistic, I think her autism is part of her political position. It is very productive. Because our everyday ideology is what in psychoanalysis we describe as fetishist disavowal. We know how serious things are, but nonetheless do not exaggerate and so on. And her basic message of Greta Thunberg is simply, don't tell me I know very well but. Forget about but. As she repeated now, just take the science seriously. It's a very simple message, and it's a very actual message. But what I find, when you mention this Latin American movement, with my great admiration for, I am honored to be in contact not with the top guy, Morales, but with Linera. But Morales wrote a couple of years ago, I think, a public letter decrying capitalism. Here I remain a Marxist. Don't idealize the previous eras as something more in balance with nature. Just look how much nature, almost more than in capitalism, was destroyed also in pre-modern societies. Like my favorite country in Europe, Iceland. How do you pronounce it? Iceland, Reykjavik.
Iceland, yeah.
You know that before Vikings arrived there from Norway, it was full of forests. They destroyed everything and so on. So don't idealize pre-modern countries. But nonetheless, I sincerely admire Linera. Linera is not Venezuela, Bolivia regime. They are not in the media, they are doing a well-calculated, modest game, but they are doing it very successfully. They are not destroying economy and so on. I think that the problem with Chavez was, it's not just external in the American intervention. Yes, all that is true. But he really didn't have a feasible new model. For me, the best definition of Hugo Chavez was Fidel Castro with money. He was lucky to have enough money, so he threw money at problems. He didn't resolve them. My hope is, again, something like Bolivia. So I totally support all this indigenous movement. Just I have two problems. One problem is don't fall into this myth of. Even some of my Latino American friends has it. There are in Upper Amazon some indigenous tribes, and they have some wisdom that... No, my dogma is always that the most developed capitalism can always exploit, ideally, pre-modern traditions. My lesson is South Africa. Remember, ANC, with all its failures, that was the greatness of Mandela and so on. They never played the cards of our African great traditions and so on. They didn't mention any return to African roots and so on. The one who did it was the King Buthelezi, who was on the payroll of apartheid, of course, and so on. So let's not fall into this trap of celebrating pre-modernity and so on. But with this proviso, I totally agree. And what attracts me in this vision is that it's not simply some pre-modern mythology, but this unique chance of a pact between third world countries and the most modern, the utmost science of the West today. Only the combination of the two can do the job.
Okay, very finally.
Now you're evil.
But very briefly, very briefly.
Yeah.
So you
Why
asked me
don't
my
I
most
kill
direct,
myself?
my
No.
most direct, most challenging question.
Yeah.
The question I have is really like how to read you. When I interviewed you about 15 years ago, you said something like, I do too many books, and you write lots of books, things come out. Also, we see...
And I said I will not, and now I do even more books. Yes.
Talk.
But I recycle myself.
And
all
you
the
recycle
time.
stuff.
I'm an ecological
Right.
writer. I
So
plagiarize myself.
Things just come out, they come out, they come out, right? It's in the framework of a system. There always seems to be a system. There's a Lacanian theory, there's a Hegelian theory. But actually, in some ways, it seems like there's kind of no filter, there's no editor there. I suppose my challenging question is, do we take your work seriously as a kind of a coherent whole, or do we just take the constant outpouring and pick the gems and just say, yes, but there's a lot of junk in there
I already answered you this when we were privately. I will very briefly answer you now. First, I'm as such, the way you described me, the second, the bad option, non-systematic, I'm in very good company. Almost all of my favorite philosophers were doing exactly this. Even if they appeared systematic, like Schelling, Hegel, they were really struggling again and again, repetitively with the same problem. For example, Hegel, Antigone. Do you know that Hegel returned to Antigone in his lessons of philosophy, history of philosophy, phenomenology, 4 or 5 times, always giving a different reading? Heidegger, another big example, in a different way, Husserl, Wittgenstein, and so on. I think Plato already, isn't he, even if it appears that you have this dialogue about this, that dialogue about that, he's always struggling with the same problem. And now, to conclude with the mega paradox, you know which one? Maybe I'm the way you describe it, particular to particular, but I think Hegel is my model here. Forget about Hegel, it's a wrong image. The great systematic thinker, everything is deduced, and so on. Read Hegel really closely. It's really often even patched up, obviously artificially combined without what in psychoanalysis we would have called sekundäre Bearbeitung. This secondary work through where you patch up the gaps and make it continuous. Hegel is this insight, that insight, and so on and so on. And I find this a wonderful paradox that the philosopher who is usually perceived as the mega systematic philosopher is effectively improvising, desperately looking for a way. Because, you know, I will tell you another thing, you would agree. Hegel basically wrote just 2 books. People forget this. An earlier one before, but Phenomenology and Logic. All other books are just written down by, he wrote 2 other Encyclopedia and Philosophy of Right, but they are university notes. He there doesn't actively think. He resumes facts which are given in his thinking. Hegel really wrote 2 books, and he was constantly changing them, rewriting them, and so on and so on. So my answer to you would be the usual, pretty boring Hegelian paradox. I try to be systematic, but to really be systematic, you must get caught in this vicious cycle of repeating yourself all the time.
Well, look, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Before we go, I'm going to say something. I like to thank the stewards at these events because they're all volunteers. But I'm realizing that on Zizek's view here, what I might be doing is it's another fetish, isn't it? I'm praising the stewards to disguise the fact that there's actually this sort of like, the people who are not being employed to do work, etc., etc. So maybe it's a distraction to thank the stewards, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to thank you for coming. The book signing, there will be a book signing, and it will be here on the stage, so make your way up at the end. Lots of other Festival Ideas events coming up. Please look out for them. But for now, could we just thank the force of nature, which is Slavoj Žižek? Thank you.
No, I should be. I am really, my God, stop applauding. And my standard joke, maybe some of you know it, don't applaud so much, because after we communists will take over, you will need all the energy to applaud endlessly the leader. Keep your energy for later. Thank you.